Hello. Hello. Yes.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the launch of the Water Atlas 2025, brought to you by the Heinrich-Böll Foundation. My name is Natasha Foote. I'm an agri-food journalist based here in Brussels, and I have the pleasure of helping to guide the conversation over the course of this evening's event. Or I should say that I'm here to help the conversations flow, because this evening is all about one of the most essential life-sustaining elements on our planet, and that is, of course, water. And as you can see, I've donned my most watery clothes for the occasion, and I think a few of our panelists have done the same. So between the overuse, pollution, climate disruption, industrial agriculture, the tide of challenges is rising fast, and it's affecting everything from ecosystems to food production, public health, and social cohesion. And that is why the Water Atlas, which has been published by the Heinrich-Böll Foundation, couldn't be more timely. So the report takes a deep dive into the currents shaping our global water realities. But the Atlas isn't just about sounding the alarm, it's also about channeling knowledge into action and inspiring collective solutions. So we're here to make a splash about the findings of this Atlas and discuss how the EU can steer us towards a fairer, more resilient and sustainable water future. But that's enough from me. Let's get the conversations flowing, going. And for this, I would like to firstly welcome to the floor Roderick Keffer-Kurz, who is Director of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation Europe, and for your opening remarks. I pass the floor.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone, distinguished guests, members of the European Parliament, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, and of course, dear friends. It's such a cliche that I was wondering, should I even say this sentence? But it is the first sentence in the water resilience strategy of the European Commission, and it's also the first sentence in the foreword of our Water Atlas. And so I will say it after all, water is life. Water is the basis of life. It's a cliche, but it's also such a simple truth. And if you look in our Water Atlas, you'll see that yet this crucial, essential resource is under strain, under stress. We're seeing falling groundwater levels, rising pollution in water, and increasing conflicts over water. Water brings droughts, floods, and water stress. It affects our lives, our food system, the economy, and even geopolitics. And in those 50 pages of the Water Atlas, you get really the tour d'horizon of all the data visualizations and facts on this basis of life. If you browse through it like I did these last couple of days, you'll find out that one cotton t-shirt takes as much water as one person needs or one person drinks in 2.5 years. You'll find out that the 3 most water-intensive energy sources are coal, nuclear, and oil. If you look on page 21, there is a statistic there that I thought was a bit worrying. You'll find out that Belgium is the country with the 3rd highest water pollution here in our very own country. And on page 32, I think this was really we might even update there with the speed, how things are advancing. You look at the thirst of the digital economy, how much water it takes to cool that cloud, to cool all these data centers. Almost every week, if you open up the Financial Times, you'll see a new deal that OpenAI has signed with some company for more data centers. So my concern is that those projections that we have in the Water Atlas 2025, 2026, 27, 28, they might look even worse. So water is not just a niche environmental policy. Water is an economic policy. It's a societal policy. It's a geopolitical policy. It's also a business opportunity. 1.7 million Europeans work in the water industry. And Europe is a leader when it comes to water technology. All issues that you'll find out if you look through our water atlas. And what I like particularly about it is that you come to the end, there's also very clear policy recommendations and policy ideas on what needs to be done now. And I think this is incredibly timely as well, because the Commission has just several months ago published its water resilience strategy. And so I think this water atlas comes at a very good time. I want to thank the team of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation for having put forth this incredible water atlas, all the people that have been involved, all the experts joining us, also the artists and data visualizations experts. And last but not least, I want to thank all our panelists who are joining us today. And without any further ado, let me pass the floor to Jan Sijsens, Deputy Head of Cabinet of Commissioner Roswell. Jan, we're very much looking forward to hearing your thoughts on this year's water atlas. Thank you very much.
Ulrich, dear colleagues, distinguished audience, friends, actually, I liked what I saw when I come in here, the facts and figures in a way. Water resilience, I have not worked on this for a very long time. It's about a year now that I'm working with Roswell, who is, as you may know, the first European Commissioner for water resilience. I think the first thing I need to understand is that actually we don't know about water in a way. That many of our countries, many of our businesses don't even know how much water they consume, where water is abstracted. And then the very first thing when I try to see with the team how can we actually bring water resilience forward, they say, well, go back to the basics actually. Just first of all, understand and know what the situation is. In that sense, I think a water atlas with basic facts and figures is very timely and great work, and congratulations for that. I think it's also very timely and pertinent because water is a topic everywhere. Germany has earlier this year adopted a national water strategy, the European Water Resilience Strategy already mentioned, which we have presented in June in this summer this year. Next year, the United Nations will come again together for the Global UN Water Conference. So also at the international level, water is a big topic. And in many of the discussions which my boss, Mrs. Oswald, is actually having with environmental ministers across the globe, we see that water has not lost for any single of them of a single inch of its importance. And the fact that you cover, I think, all those dimensions, the national, the European, and also the global one in your atlas, I think is also a great contribution to the debate. So this is really important. Knowledge is key in Europe, and you know that we have, I think, quite solid legislative body or legislative framework for water resilience. But from our side, we think we can make much more out of this, and we need to make much more out of this because indeed the water crisis is urgent. The crisis of quality and quantity of water, we are lacking both, and that is not any more just an issue for certain parts of Europe, but it's really both on quality and quantity, something which is relevant up to the high north of Europe. It's Sweden, the home country of my commissioner. Actually, this year they need to ration water basically and prioritize water use, which is, if you have ever spent summers in Sweden, you know you are normally used to kind of days and weeks of rain. That is my experience. So this is quite frightening actually to hear these kind of stories. This is why the European Water Resilience Strategy, and I think also here the Water Atlas fits super well, has taken a broader approach to water resilience indeed. We are not focusing only on quality, only on quantity. We look at both of them. We look at the European water cycle and how we can repair it, because that is still the basis for our water supply. And if the cycle is broken, the supply won't work either and will not be sustainable. We are promoting the water efficiency first principle, and water efficient economy actually, which uses the scarce resource we have in an efficient way. We all need to get much better in that. I think already mentioned a couple of the examples from the business sectors, from the data centers to the agriculture, but really any sector, any part of our economy needs water. If the beer brewery, the small beer brewery doesn't have a water supply anymore, well, there will be no beer. And I think we can probably pretty much any good we can think about, no water will not work anymore. So indeed, this principle of water efficiency and using really water wisely actually is also the second big principle of an objective of our strategy. And again, interestingly, indeed, the European water legislation, the framework directive, includes quite some good principles on it. For example, that you should have a fair water pricing, that you should also have plans and approaches on indeed using water. So there's a lot we can build on here, and where we can become much better together. And in our conversations, indeed, with industry as well, with the various sectors of the economy, we really see, also with the consumer associations, we really see that everybody's willing and is on board actually to work more on this. Everybody's willing to take their share because people see very concretely and really that there's a problem. And so we need to, I think, make more of this and work forward. We have given out this more target or idea objective of reducing our water consumption by 10%. And we are now, will now be discussing, there have been discussions, and we continue to do that, indeed, what that really means. And of course, there is no one size fits all, but I think our idea and our objective also was actually to bring out the idea to everybody that everybody needs to think about this. Everybody needs to think about how we can actually use the resource of water more efficiently. And the third principle or the third objective we've put out is indeed access to clean and affordable water. And again, that links to the long-standing, I think, efforts and fight we have actually to make Europe's water cleaner, to clean it up, basically. And we're having significant new challenges from PFAS pollution to indeed the continuous also interaction with agriculture, where Europe is on the one hand investing a lot on wastewater treatment, on many other points. But we also still need to get more and better. And again, I think knowledge where the hotspots are, what can be done actually to clean it up is key. So again, facts and figures is what it takes. So those, I think, are the three big principles which we put out with our strategy, and we really hope now that this can also inform indeed new push on water resilience in Europe and the member states. On our side, the next steps will be actually very concrete dialogues with member states, one by one, indeed to see together, because water is, of course, a very local, regional, or national issue as well, how we can see together how we can make the most of the European framework, the European money which is available. The European Investment Bank has just put 50 billion of investments between now and 2027. In our midterm review, actually, for the cohesion policy, we've put water one of the priorities. So right now, indeed, every region, every member state can get co-finance of up to 100%, can get much higher shares of money. And as you know, there is quite a lot of money which has not been used in cohesion policy. So it's really the moment to also make use of the money which is there and to which also Europe contributes. And then last but not least, the global picture. And I think that's where we all need to also see the water issue as a really an opportunity for Europe also to engage and to make these new partnerships with regions and countries around the globe, which we are all talking about. We need to diversify. But that's not just trade relationships. It's also really working very concretely with countries on the issues which are relevant to them and are relevant to us. And I think water, as I said in the beginning, seems to be for almost each and every country around the world a key issue, for some more than for others. But we also sense that Europe has a lot, I mean, people are looking at Europe also for this topic, because I think we have something to offer, certainly, and we still have a willingness to reach out and discuss together. And again, facts and figures are necessary for that. So it's really an agenda which is more up to date, and unfortunately, I have to say, more relevant than ever in our member states, in Germany, here in Brussels, and for our global relations. And so great to have this atlas here, and congratulations for it, and I wish you an excellent year.
Excellent. Thank you very much for that, Jan, for contextualising our discussions here today, the wider picture. Also talking about beer brewing in Belgium, very smart, you know your audience. So I'd now like to introduce our next speaker of today's event, and that is Kristen Funke, who is one of the executive editors of the Water Atlas 2025, and she's going to give us a deep dive into what is inside the Atlas. So Kristen, I pass you the floor.
I'm Christine from the International Environmental Policy Division of the Heinrich-Böll Foundation in Berlin. And I'm very happy to be here and to give you a short tour through the Water Atlas. And I would like to begin with thanking some of my colleagues from various offices, because many people have worked on this publication, and there have been several authors, editing team, the graphic designers, and as I said, colleagues from various offices around the world. And also, I'm actually happy to announce that the translations to French, Italian, and Spanish are already in the making. So, the Water Atlas. It aims to raise more awareness of this valuable and vital resource, and with plenty of infographics in 19 chapters, the Atlas touches upon many aspects of water, from our increasing consumption and climate crisis, to pollution and biodiversity, or conflicts in water as a human right, to mention just a few. With the Atlas, we want to provide information on the urgency of the problems, but also show many opportunities and solutions. Water, it has been said already, is the basis of life on our planet. And in fact, water covers more than 2/3 of it. But only about 3% are fresh water. And of that, 97% is tied up in ice caps and deep underground. So just 0.3 of all fresh water is in constant circulation. And I want to start with this infographic showing the water cycle. Human intervention is causing profound changes in the water cycle. We have strained rivers, drained wetlands, sealed surfaces. We are over-extracting water and polluting it. As a result, this cycle is tipping out of balance, and we have already exceeded the limits of sustainable water use. Producing increasing amounts of food and goods, extracting more and more resources, and cooling ever larger data and energy facilities require enormous amounts of water. Today, the total amount of fresh water withdrawn from rivers, lakes, and reservoirs exceed 4,000 cubic kilometers per year. And global water consumption is expected to double by 2050. The next infographic I'd like to show is the global flow of virtual water. Virtual water is the unseen water used for the production of food and goods, vegetables and meat, for example, but also textiles, plastic, paper, and electronics all have substantial water footprints. Or take artificial intelligence. ChatGPT uses half a liter of water for every 20 questions it answers. Data centers will consume nearly 670 billion liters of water annually by 2030, more than double the amount of today. And they are frequently expanding in already drought-stricken regions. Agriculture, which consumes 72% of global fresh water, but also energy production, extractive industries, and other industrial sectors are causing water stress in many countries. Water stress means that the balance between water availability and water withdrawal has shifted. This map shows the predicted water stress in 2050 if we continue in the same way. So you can see that especially North and South Africa, but also the Middle East, Latin America, and South Asia will suffer from high to very high water stress. Water scarcity is exacerbated by more droughts in some regions, while flooding occurs more frequently in others, both with devastating effects. Such extreme weather events are caused by rising global temperatures. A warmer ocean disrupts the natural water circulation and negatively affects the flow of heat on the surface. In turn, air takes up more moisture, resulting in more weather extremes and severe storms, as we just saw last week in the devastating storm Melissa. Water and the human-made climate crisis are closely interlinked, and this has an especially profound impact on the water balance in the global south. More extreme weather not only undermines the availability of water for households, agriculture, and industry, but also increases the risk of conflict. And who gets priority when water becomes scarce? Farms, factories, mines, or families? This often results in clashes between public and private water rights. Water stress deepens social tensions and inequalities. And again, it is the most vulnerable people who are particularly affected. Today, about 2.2 billion people still lack access to clean and adequate drinking water, despite this being a human right. But even if water is, even if water is accessible, it is often too polluted to use. About 80% of all wastewater enters water bodies without any treatment. This infographic shows some of the sources of pollution: chemicals, industrial effluent, plastic, pesticides, and fertilizer are all threatening our health, ecosystems, and biodiversity. In addition, coal and metal mining, but also oil refineries heavily contaminate rivers and groundwater. PFAS, also mentioned here, highly persistent industrial chemicals used across many sectors and in many products, are a huge problem. They can cause enormous damage to living beings and ecosystems. This graphic shows the effects of PFAS on the human body. They can cause different types of cancer and other diseases, and also seriously impair certain developments in unborn children. The next map shows the big pollution problem we have right here in Europe. Over 60% of our surface waters have poor or very poor ecological status. Contamination, excessive water extraction, and the disruption of natural flow patterns are the main reasons. European waters are in dire need of better protection, especially in the face of the climate crisis. Europe is warming faster than any other continent, and the impacts on water are felt acutely. Flooding and droughts are becoming more frequent and severe. And while robust legislation does exist, governments are slow to act. More political will and better implementation are necessary. We urgently need to change course, and fortunately, we still have a little bit of time left. Let us look at some of the solutions and ways forward. First of all, water protection must be conceived in terms of prevention. The most effective way to maintain water quality is to stop contamination in the first place. Toxic substances must not be allowed to enter water at all. Industry and agriculture should be seen as water stakeholders and also be held accountable for their effects. In fact, agricultural businesses and farms play a key role in water management. For example, they can protect water resources by planting adapted crops, utilizing rainwater for irrigation, and applying cultivation methods that limit evaporation and protect the soil. Agroforestry, for example, helps to slow down and store water, while simultaneously cooling the area and increasing biodiversity. Rewetting peatlands and restoring wetlands are essential. As this graphic shows, a renaturalized river floodplain can boost biodiversity, mitigate climate change, and provide natural flood protection. Further, rivers and streams that have been straightened or obstructed must be allowed to meander and overflow their banks once more. Natural climate protection has huge potential to restore disrupted climate cycles and reverse environmental damage. The renaturation of just 15% of global ecosystems could prevent 60% of species extinction as well as 300 gigatons of CO2 emissions. So combined with other climate actions and the phase out of fossil fuels, this will effectively help to tackle the climate crisis. In our cities, we need more trees and plants, as many and unsealed surfaces as possible to let rainwater seep in. Smart cities, for example, absorb water and store it, while green rooftops clean the microclimate. And that directly links to the question of governance. Democratic, community-based water management has shown that water is used more responsibly and sustainably when kept in public hands instead of private companies. Last but not least, circular economy can reduce water use considerably through efficient resource management, recycling, and reuse in both production and consumption. Obviously, there is no one-fits-all solution, and the challenge lies in balancing social, economic, and ecological needs. Transparent governance, strong legal frameworks, and inclusive water planning will be critical to making those choices fair and sustainable. We hope the Water Atlas will be a contribution to the protection of our most valuable resource. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the very impressive facts and figures there. I think my mouth actually dropped open when you said it was every 20 ChatGPT questions, half a litre of water. It's incredible, this hidden cost there, very sobering. So thank you very much for that overview. We're now going to have a short video message all the way from India, where the Heinrich-Böll Foundation in India working with an organisation called India Water Talks, and it's a platform of water stories from northeast India. They also act as a workspace for people working on water in the region. So let's hear from them.
Understand the decision makers with regard to water would let us learn you right now. It's true enough. If you do so, then you have and you do not have scarcity, and other people have access to water.
I don't and myself has been practical and change like all of the different. One of the specific water challenges that the region has facing is it is rainfall and that is very unconventional. Just the rivers and agricultural owners, it has been taken a lot and it hasn't affected the agricultural output. Specifically, my area is known for doing tea, restaurants, and it has been impacting on our land scale and it is affecting the income level of the development and on many levels, and it's quite harsh on the population.
The issue of this oscillation between scarcity of water, where people have to buy water, rates of fall, and followed by flood. So this oscillation has become a major problem. The last couple of years, we see this happening over a period of time, over and over again, in fact, in a year. Coupled that with the infrastructure which is not able to handle it, and institutions which are not able to handle it. So I think people are left in a situation where they have to deal with these difficult changing weather conditions, and this has made life very miserable for the poor people. And I think this needs local solution, but also global solution.
In our village, especially from the high mountain that we have there, which we call it Shirisham, there are at least about 36 streams. But by 1990s and 2000, there is the water that is produced or that is sourced out from this mountain is about 70 lakhs liter of water per day, which is outsourced to the town. But in the recent past, particularly about maybe perhaps 10, 15 years ago, it has drastically reduced, and it says that it's about only 2 to 3 lakhs liter per day. So in that sense, because of the climate change, some of the streams that used to be perennial tropical, it has also become seasonal, and therefore the decrease in the water source at this point of time.
The local communities can also play a very important role in the sense that their indigenous knowledge, their ideas about water management, or using methods which come from the above, which are top heavy.
There's a non-negotiable, I think, because obstructing water, the natural flow of water must be ensured. When infrastructure is being built, it must ensure that water is allowed to flow. We cannot obstruct water in a way which causes huge disruptions, affecting the lives of millions of people across India, across South Asia, and definitely in the States, developing the States including the South. Whether it's dams being built for hydropower, whether it's embankments being built, roadways and railways being built, if they're done without understanding the drainage system of the entire watershed, you're going to have trouble. You have to allow the natural flow of water.
I'm going to put myself here. I'm going to put myself down here now for the next part of this event. And so for this, I'd like to dive into our panel session for this evening. So I'd like to welcome to the floor Jutta Paulus, who is a Green MEP who sits on Parliament's Environment Committee. So welcome to the stage, Jutta. And we also have with us today Sarah Johansson, who is Senior Policy Officer for Water Pollution and Prevention at the Green NGO European Environmental Bureau. Thank you everyone for bringing your name tag as well. And last but not least, we have Tom Demaya, who is a fellow from the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation, who's worked globally as an international consultant with 2 decades of experience in integrated water resources management. So welcome to the stage, everyone. So I just wanted to kick off with some reflections generally from the Water Atlas. So we just had the presentation there, the overview. I'm sure you've all hopefully had a chance to have a read. So perhaps to kick us off, and perhaps I'll start with Jutta and work my way back. Could you talk us through what marked you most when you looked at the Water Atlas, and what resonated with you most in terms of your work?
Well, actually, it was.
Is that working? Okay, let me come to mine.
Maybe I have to address some sort of. This one?
Yes.
That's right. Press that button.
We'll have a backup mic, don't worry, it's coming. It's not an event in Brussels if there's not a technical. There we go. Is that working?
Okay,
Yes.
this is
excellent.
actually what did resonate with me was the map which was just shown about the ecological status of water bodies in different European countries. I did notice that some of the member states of the EU were gray, so either there is no data or it didn't find its way into the atlas, but of course this would be interesting. And also, I mean, I didn't read every single word of it yet, obviously, but I had a brief glimpse through all the different chapters. And what I found very interesting, I mean, we as Greens are often marked as ideological when we are talking about what should be a public good and what should be treated as such. But when we look at the data, the facts, and see that with the privatization of water supply for the public, prices go up and quality goes down. So this is not ideology. This is data and facts. And I think EU member states which have not engaged in privatization of water yet should really refrain from doing it, because that's what the data shows us. It doesn't bring advantages for the public, it does bring profits for some.
Yeah, absolutely. Hello? Can you hear me? Yes? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. Absolutely, yeah, I was also really struck by the disparity in the map as well on the member states. I think we'll go into that a bit later on, and also these questions of justice as well. Who owns it? Who controls it? Who gets to access this? But first, Sarah, let me come to you. Again, the same question, what was it that kind of struck you most as you were looking at this water atlas, and what resonated with you most?
Thank you, and I hope my microphone is working. I think to me, the fact that the atlas is coming out is a message on its own. We know climate change is already here, the climate crisis is happening here and now, and it's felt through the water cycle. So we really do feel the impact of the disrupted water cycle, and I think the atlas did a really good job in explaining what is happening, but also why it's happening, because yes, extreme rain events and long periods of drought are driven by climate change, but the impacts are very much related to how we manage water, but also how we manage land, and how our society works. And I think the Atlas did a fantastic job in showing that, also with all the nice infographics, and I'm sure we get the chance to go deeper into all of those pressures and impacts, and also what member states are and are not doing, because we have a good framework that Jan also mentioned in his introduction. We have a good framework for protecting water, but it's not well implemented.
Okay, we'll dig into that a bit later on, but firstly, Tom, what was the kind of main highlight for you you'd like to emphasize from the Atlas?
Yes, so first of all, congratulations. It's a nice piece of work, what you put together, and there's lots of interesting information. A lot of the things you could say is not new, and still it's necessary to tell it. It's still necessary to present it. The fact that, as was put in the introduction, water is life. It's not just the basis of life, it is life. Water, there's a right to water, but also water and nature should have rights. So there's a couple of things that we could maybe still even take a bit further. Water scarcity, water pollution, it's not new, it's been going on so long, yet still there's been a lot of efforts being done already in EU, and still we're not reaching the status that we have to reach. When I was a young boy, there were no fish in the river Scheldt. Now there is fish in the river Scheldt, but it's still not. Now we have new pollutants, we have the microplastics, we have PFAS. So we're not there yet. It continues. So it emphasizes a lot the democratic governance, citizen actions. First, I thought citizen action is mentioning, but it's not dismissing, but it's actually there. And I think we have to also explore this further, take this much further. What is the role of citizens' engagement in water management? But of course, not only leaving it over to citizens. Governments have a tremendously important role in setting the policies, in investing, and in working together with communities, with citizens to manage water and use water in a good, wise way. We mentioned something about efficiency. I think I even like more the term wise use of water, not just efficient use.
Yeah, I like that, wise use. And I like what you said there about citizens' engagement. I think we'll come back to that theme later on. But firstly, I'd like to come to you, Sarah, to come back on this fact that we saw this map, 60% of water bodies in poor or very poor ecological condition, and you mentioned about why current directives are not working on this. Maybe you can dive into this, but also I saw a huge disparity in this map. Really interesting. We have France at 20%, Austria at 12%, I can't remember quite, but 12%, but Luxembourg at 60%. I mean, why the disparity, and what can we learn from that in terms of the national approach for the European Union?
Yeah, I mean, we do have a strong framework for water management in the EU. We have the Water Framework Directive that was adopted 25 years ago, and with the initial or with the principal objective to restore Europe's waters by 2015, and that's what member states signed up to do. Then they got some leeway to take more time, and we have next big deadline in 2027. But as the map clearly shows, we're far from, or member states are far from delivering on this legal obligation. And I think if you look into the Commission's assessment of the water management plans that the member states prepare, and also in the there was the fitness check evaluation of the Water Framework Directive. It's pretty clear that a main hurdle is that other pieces of legislation and economic instruments like the Common Agricultural Policy are working sort of counter the objectives of the Water Framework Directive. So I think there is really a lot to be done in terms of harmonizing all these different objectives and priorities that we have in the EU and make sure that they deliver together. I do hope that the so-called strategic dialogues that the Commission now is having with each member state, trying to identify the key implementation hurdles, will help in also overcoming these hurdles, because what is reassuring is that we do have the tools to deal with these problems. But we do need more political will to actually do that.
And talking about political will, maybe I'll come over to Jutta. I can bring you in here on the same theme, but also we did have this the water strategy presented just recently, a couple of months back. And I'm going to quote your own words here. I was looking at your statement on this, and you called this a hodgepodge policy, which I really like the concept of, but obviously it's not a positive thing. So could you dig into a little bit what you see was missing from the water strategy and from the approach in general there? Why is it a hodgepodge policy, as you called it?
Yeah, I just have to turn it on again. What I was missing was let's say, the holistic view on it, because you cannot expect a water strategy to work if you're, let's say, very reluctant to touch agriculture. You cannot expect problems of over-extraction, over-consumption to be solved by simply installing digital meters. Because, I mean, I see the sense of digital meters when it comes to electricity, because we have a diurnal cycle. We have more solar during the day, obviously. So we have times when there is more electricity and people should be encouraged to use it then and not in the evening when there is no sun. But with water, we don't have that. So I don't see the sense of having smart water meters. And for my feeling, it was a lot about, I would call it techno fixes, and not so much about how can we actually employ nature to help us, where we have this wonderful infographic on what we are actually to gain by, for example, restoring floodplains, rewetting peatlands, and the water strategy by the Commission was more focused on the technological side and not so much on the nature-based solutions. That was my main criticism, putting all sort of technology stuff together and hoping that it will work somehow. I mean, we have, as humanity, we have extracted so much groundwater that the Earth's axis has tilted by that. Because we have extracted so much mass from below ground and brought it up, that actually the axis has tilted, just to visualize how large the problem is. And we will not solve this with smart meters. And we will, counting on what you just said about wise use of water, we had this report by the European Court of Auditors, which actually said, well, Commission, you gave money to a member state for more efficient use of water, which was true, they used water more efficiently, but for growing a crop which simply doesn't belong there. So this is efficient use of water, but not wise use of water. And that's the main problem I see with the strategy that the Commission brought forward.
Yeah, I really like that distinction between efficient and wise. I think that is actually a really important distinction. I definitely want to dig into the agriculture side of things, especially if it's technical, but let me come to you first, Tom. I mean, when we're looking down at the map, there's also the global map, you know, it's quite clear. I mean, you've worked not only in Europe, across Africa, other places, it's quite clear many regions are facing the same issues. And I'm wondering what, from your work, you can draw as the main kind of learnings for our approach here in terms of successful approaches, parallels that we can draw between the different regions that you worked in.
A challenging question, because the challenges are complex and there are similarities, of course, with the challenges that we face here in Western Europe or in Africa and Asia and other places. And the solutions will be different as well, although there are some elements that I think are important everywhere. You were already mentioned the wise use instead of not just the efficient use, the engagement of communities. And that's something that I've seen. My work that I did 15, 20 years ago in Africa and Haiti was a lot more community-based, and you could see very different dynamics. And at that time, I was often thinking, we're going to ask so much of these communities. If in Belgium, where I grew up, our government would come to ask us the same thing. I said, why was it? But still, that's the only way to go. And I think that's also more and more coming here, being internalized here. If I look at what's now happening in Flanders, we're more and more addressing water use with local coalitions, we call them coalitions, government is part of that, but also other sectors are part of that, citizens are part of that, academia is part of that. So and these are things that I'm not saying per se that these are inspired on what's been going on in other places in the world already, but I think it's proven that that it can lead to much more optimal results, much more healthier outcomes and more sustainable outcomes. If you want real transformation, you need to go through this whole cycle.
Yes, from the different levels, here, zooming in, zooming out. Thank you for that. Let me come back now to agriculture, because Jutta just said that we cannot have this conversation without talking about agriculture. It does, of course, account for something like 70% of global freshwater use, a core polluter. Sarah, let me come to you first, kind of more broadly set it in terms of industrial agriculture, the pressures there. I mean, where do you see the strongest levers for change in terms of moving the needle there on water management, whether it's nutrient management, agroecology pricing? Where do you kind of see the most?
Yeah, indeed, agriculture remains a key pressure on water bodies, both in terms of abstraction, water use, but also pollution. I think it's a third of groundwater bodies are impacted by agricultural pollution. But agriculture is also where so much can be done. Agriculture and all land use is, where we can store rainwater, and it can serve as a natural water storage. So there, and we can also, by nurturing more healthy soils, etc. So there is an enormous potential there that we simply cannot overlook. I read a number recently that 40% of rainfall is stored as rainwater, so in the soils, etc. But industrial agriculture is drying our soils up, so we're actually depriving ourselves of a really crucial water reserve. And I think Flanders is a key example, where, well, anyone who lives here knows the amount of rain we get, but still water per capita is really low, because there has been a lot of work in the past decades or centuries actually to dig all these channels and dikes, so a lot of the water that falls just goes out through the channels and into the North Sea, and we don't keep it. So I think we really need to work with agriculture to transform agriculture into something that can both produce food but also ensure that we have both food and water for the future. And I think we can't speak about agriculture without also touching on animal numbers and livestock production, because Europe is already beyond the sort of ecological boundaries in terms of nutrient pollution, and livestock production is at the heart of it. There it's also clear that we need to reduce animal numbers to sustainable numbers. We have regions like the Netherlands, Flanders again, and other regions where the densities are simply not sustainnable. So yeah, and that's of course linked to diet, but that's another topic. But yeah, essentially there is a lot to be done there in terms of agriculture.
Absolutely, and it's interesting, talking about Belgium as a case study, because I was also kind of shocked and surprised to see that it was one of the darker red on that map. But I was thinking, it rains enough here, it's crazy. Staying on the agriculture theme, Victoria, I'll come back to you, because you did mention the common agricultural policy, and it would be remiss of me not to jump in and dive in on this. I don't want to get into the details of the new proposal, but just to hone in on what you said about the linkages, because it really does feel like it's quite divorced from the policies of quite standalone. And perhaps I can push you there to talk a little bit about how you see the policy linkages to drive the change that Sarah was talking about, this potential that agriculture also has, and looking at how we can do that, especially as we move to a more nationalised version of this policy.
Yes, actually, I'm very much concerned about the new proposal. I mean, we had, that was still in the last mandate, of course, there was this strategic dialogue on the future of European agriculture, where every, let's say, major stakeholder was at the table. We had Copa-Cogeca, we had the food industry, we had the NGOs, so it was a huge crowd of people which were sitting together for quite some time and working on, let's say, a compromise text, which is, of course, I mean, it's a compromise. So, of course, no one says, yes, that's what I always wanted, but everyone says, okay, it's something I can sign up to. But what we are now seeing has nothing to do with the final report of that strategic dialogue. And with the renationalization that we're seeing, and I mean, I'm not in the Agri committee, so I didn't delve deep into the new proposal, but from what I heard from the colleagues who did, they say, well, basically we have a floor for the direct payments, and for everything else, member states can more or less do what they want. And there, I'm very much afraid that we might see a race to the bottom, because each member state will say, well, if my neighbor will, I don't know, pay their funds more or make less environmental conditionality, why should I do so? Because I will be harming our own farmers. So I think this common agricultural policy is no longer common. If we give so much flexibility that virtually nothing is agreed anymore, then we don't have a common agricultural policy. But what we would need is actually paying farmers not just for producing whatever, but for producing public value, producing in a way that we have more increase in groundwater, that we have healthier soils, that we have better conditions for our biodiversity. But I don't think that this agricultural policy will lead to that. And looking at the majorities that we're facing in Parliament, I don't see that things will actually improve in the parliamentary process.
A rocky road ahead there for the CAP, yeah. Perhaps to move from the EU level downward to the community level now, Tom, as you mentioned earlier, the importance of community action. What examples of regenerative or collective water management in farming have you seen that can show changes possible at that level? I know you're an advocate of regenerative water solutions. I mean, I hear a lot about regenerative agricultural practices. Do you see enough attention on this element?
When it comes to regenerative approaches, we think mostly indeed about regenerative agriculture, where there's a lot more has been done on that field already. in water governance, water management, this term is still rarely here. It's not yet really a thing, regenerative water management. Maybe we don't need to call it that way because it's not necessarily that revolutionary. We speak about all the ingredients already here. And so it's in France, it's thing, idéologie régénérative in the English-speaking literature is less, but there we speak, for instance, more about the small water cycle, which is also tied to that, which is about restoring nature, taking into account green water as well, which was mentioned already as well today. And so when we think about a water cycle, we very often think about this global water cycle, the glaciers, and the rivers, and the sea, and the clouds, but we have to take care of our small water cycle in our landscapes. I like what also what was written, the term which was used in the Atlas, climate landscapes. It's all about the same thing eventually. So what is different at community level, or what might I have seen? I think it's exactly the fact, like what you were talking about, agriculture and water, they're two different silos, and even while we've been speaking about integrated water research management for what, 30 years or so now, which is about making the sectors collaborate and so on, it's still working in silos. When you go to more resilient approaches, regenerative approaches, we cannot talk about silos anymore. And on local level, that's much more easier, I think. You see that happen much more in a natural way, that people, farmers are the ones also that are dealing with the water and so on. But once you start to go to institutions, to policy, it's just how we're organized, and it's so difficult to change that apparently. I can understand for policymakers that it is difficult to change that, but I think it will have to change somehow. And on local level, I think these changes are more naturally in our micro smoother.
Thank you for that. And staying, maybe one last question more on the policy front before I move to a different topic. Sarah, I want to come back to you because, we're speaking about farming, pesticides, fertilizers, of course, huge pollutants, but there are also, as we saw from the Atlas, PFAS, microplastics, very widespread now in Europe's waters. So perhaps I can also hear from you a little bit about the pace of change when it comes to more chemical and industrial policies in that respect. How do you see the pace there?
Yeah, first of all, I think we have been used to think of accessibility and availability of water in terms of quantity, but now that's also a question of quality. We have examples from all over Europe, but I'll take one from my own home country, Sweden. We have numerous PFAS hotspots, and that has led to, in some cases, that the municipality needs to relocate the water abstraction point, which costs a lot of money because it's really difficult to remediate a groundwater source that has been contaminated by PFAS in those quantities. But what I think is really worrying is that the knowledge about the dangers of PFAS is sort of evolving while the knowledge about the extent of the pollution is evolving. And that's not a good mix. So we really have no time to waste. We need better regulation now. We're waiting and hoping for a broad ban of PFAS, but meanwhile there is a lot that can be done at national level in terms of regulating industrial discharges. We were speaking about solutions here, and I think, and you mentioned the dialogue from agriculture, but I think one positive example that we have in Europe is Denmark, because they had something similar, but at the national level, where there was a dialogue between environmental NGOs, and an agreement between environmental NGOs, farming associations, and that actually has led to something. Now that is in the implementation phase already, so they are not wasting time. Now let's see how this works in practice, but at least it shows that things can happen. They have said that they're going to convert 15% of agricultural land to nature, etc. But Denmark has also banned a number of PFAS-containing pesticides. So I think there are also some promising examples at national level that I would love to see escalated to European level, and it shows that things can be done.
It's a nice, hopeful message to end on there. Thank you very much for that. I'd now like to turn more towards questions of fairness, justice, and access, because of course, if you've got the quantity of water and the good quality of water, but you don't have the access for certain communities, that's also, and that's a key element in the atlas, emphasising the social inequalities. So, Jutta, perhaps I can come to you on this first. The concept of water justice. I mean, how can this be understood in the EU context, and what does that say to you? What is your reading of that?
Well, we often think that access to water is only a problem in the global south, but it's not. I mean, we've seen the figures in the atlas that also in Europe, not everyone has access to sufficient clean water resources. And also what we're increasingly seeing is the privatization of water resources. I had contact with a citizens initiative today, which are situated in Bavaria, and it's a small town. And they just, the administration just signed a contract with Aldi, which is a major retail chain in Germany and also in neighboring countries. The two Aldi brothers are the richest people of Germany. And they got the right to extract millions, literally millions of cubic meters of groundwater in that small town for free. So they don't even have to pay for it. No one really knows why, because obviously they maybe could afford to pay for it. And the people living there are very much afraid that their drinking water supply might be affected by that. And some weeks ago, I visited a similar citizen initiative in Brandenburg, which is a drought-stricken region, where Red Bull will build a factory to serve all Central and Eastern Europe, also extracting millions of cubic meters of groundwater. And the relevant data where the contract is based on stems from 2002. So it's, let's say, from a past world, where rainfall patterns were different, where also groundwater replenishment was different. But they now have the right to extract these vast amounts of water. And we're seeing this not only in Germany, we're seeing it in France, we're seeing it in Italy, we're seeing it all over Europe. And I think that is a very dangerous development, because at the end of the day, as you have said, water is life, water is the basis of life, water is, of course, also the basis of our economy. Try building an economy without clean water, how fun, will work. And therefore it should be distributed in a way that, as was said in the beginning, families first, and then we can look at everything else, which doesn't mean that every citizen should have the right to unlimited amounts of water. And I think pricing is a relevant factor. In my home region, pricing for agriculture was introduced only some years ago. Before, agriculture could extract water for free, because Germany was always a country with a lot of water. It's only in the recent decades that regions come under water stress. And it was a huge, let's say, uproar. Well, why should we pay for it? We produce food. Yeah, great. Of course you produce food, but maybe think about your ways of doing irrigation and not do it with those sprinklers running at noon, where half of the water you're sprinkling is evaporating all the time. So pricing does play a role, but there again, we have to make sure that it's fair. We have to make sure that everyone pays the same price.
Yeah, I do visit a lot of farms. I often see these sprinklers going in broad sunlight, and I think, oh, definitely, I see that's a lot across Europe in various countries. Let me stay on the theme of the same theme here in terms of whose voices are heard. And Tom, you spoke at the beginning there about citizen engagement and the importance of this. Really questioning, how water management and climate adaptation projects can bring in local voices and staying on the theme of justice concerns. Perhaps I can bring you in here to talk a little bit more about citizens' engagement in these processes.
Well, it's good to see that there are initiatives like the Youth Parliament for Water and so on that take up these voices actively in the international scene. If you go to the Water Conference and so on, you always have indigenous peoples present, but sometimes it does feel a bit, are they there because they need to be present, or do we really listen to them? When it comes to fairness, to justice, basic issue is indeed that we measure everything by economic standards. We still look at water as an economic good and not as life, as a basis of life or life in. So we don't need to think just at changing our water governance paradigms, but our governance of life, of our economy as a whole. And there we can learn so much from this indigenous peoples. When I started to dive more into this concept of resilience and systems thinking and so on, I found it very interesting. But then if you hear indigenous people speaking, they actually say the same thing, only with other words and other vocabulary, but they embody it, they live it, they don't put scientific terms and difficult words on it, they just live it. So yes, let's listen to them, and let's change. There's also a lot of interesting work done about water ethics and other frameworks where we take decisions more on values, not just economic values, but a broader set of values and taking into account the intrinsic value of nature, of water. And I think I would like to see more happening on that we can go a lot from other places in the world.
Thank you very much. I'm just going to put one last question to Sarah before I throw it out to the audience. This is your warning that if you've got a question to be prepared. I'll come to you in a minute. But Sarah, let's stay on the same theme here. You two raised a really important point here that in terms of inequalities and access to water, we don't often think maybe in Europe that is the case. You know, we think maybe the global south, other places, but it is increasingly the case. And so maybe you can talk about the biggest barriers preventing communities from realising this right to water in Europe and how we can better support this.
No, you're absolutely right, and I was myself quite shocked when I read that in Europe still 10 million people lack access to basic sanitation, so it's definitely here, and it's like there are now these additional layers that I touched on previously that we're sometimes not having access to water because it is polluted. Our Spanish member organization looked into the situation there and found that 200,000 people in Spain can't drink tap water because it has excessive levels of nitrates, again coming from the famous pig farming industry. So I think there are many layers to this, including also the cost of pollution. Another example from my home country linked to PFAS pollution is that once you install the treatment, so you take the decision to protect people, but then they need to pay because then water bills go up. In Uppsala, the water bill went up by nearly 30%. After they had to install the treatment. So I think this is really also a fairness point on how we price water and how we put that price back to the ones that pollute. I think here we also have interesting examples at national level. In France, for example, they introduced these PFAS tax on industrial discharges that then can be earmarked to treat drinking water so that you sort of close that loop financially. But yeah, I think that is a growing concern about who bears the cost, or just simply how many people will let die in flood events. I was looking at the numbers, and in 2023, 150 lives were claimed in storms and floods in Europe, and then in 2024 that jumped up to over 300 people. So we're not going in the right direction here, and yeah, it's people that are paying the price.
Absolutely, yeah, that's quite a sobering note to end at this point on. But absolutely, no, that's not a trajectory. It's very worrying. We're doubling actually between 2023 and 2024. Very shocking.
Just briefly to add on that, I mean, we have luckily we have passed the Urban Wastewater Treatment Directive, which has for the first time, also in the realm of water, the extended producer responsibility. So that the fourth basin, so to speak, in the wastewater treatment plants, which has to be built for wastewater treatment plants serving more than 150,000 people. 80% of the cost has to be borne by the pharma and cosmetic industry, because they are the ones that are actually the reason for those micropollutants being present. And it was a huge success. But it's under attack, because the industry has now found out, oh my God, this is going to cost us millions. This is money that we cannot distribute to our shareholders. So let's make sure that we won't be the ones paying it. So they are lobbying very, very strongly that this directive will be revised and that the cost will be distributed to the citizens instead. And their argumentation is, well, it's not us using those substances, it's the citizens. Well, you're the ones producing them, right? So it's your choice whether you produce something that's biologically degradable or not.
All right, thank you very much for that. I think it's time now to throw out to the audience for any questions. Does anybody have any questions? Just put your hand up and we will get to the microphone to you. Yes, I saw a question here. Oh yeah, thank you very much. The lady in the striped black and white shirt, I think is the first one. If you could just quickly introduce yourself and say who your question is addressed to.
Yes, hi, my name is Charlotte Burgess, and I'm quite happy actually here to policy just mentioned urban wastewater treatment directive, because until recently I was working also in the unit on that, so I'm having to defend it every day. It's still like it's not safe yet, so I'm very curious also what will happen there with my old unit. And thank you anyways for all of your insights. I'm very, it really resonates with me. Have had the trouble also seeing the political climate change so much, and also the political steer of what the water resilience strategy should be. And in that context, I'm a bit curious on an EU level, in a time where we're actually going in the opposite direction, where we have, it's out now that we are going towards environmental deregulation. What would you say are the hopes for us to position these topics and still advance them beyond just doom and glooming, but how can we still get our foot in the door in these times, or is it kind of waiting for the next opportunity to open up, perhaps when the tides shift again? But thank you. It's addressed to Yuta and Sarah, whoever feels compelled to answer.
Great question, thank you. Who would like to take this?
As actually, I mean, if we look back to 2019, why did we have a Green Deal? Because literally millions of citizens were in the streets demanding action. And so this is also part of our job today, making sure that those citizens who say, I want clean water, and I don't believe that I should bear the cost for industrial pollution, those citizens have to make their voices heard again. And it's our job to bring information to them, to bring facts to them, to do campaigning, to do networking, to show to all those initiatives, you're not alone in your fight. You have people in Germany, in France, in Denmark, in Sweden, wherever, who are facing the same problems. And you can make your voices heard. You can address your MEPs, you can address your ministers, and you can also call them out. And that's very important, because when there is something that politicians are afraid of, it's the public opinion.
Sarah, did you want to come in on this point?
Oh, yeah, I'm just thinking, we cannot wait for getting our foot in the door. I mean, I don't know, the door is open, omnibuses are coming. We're incredibly worried that the water framework directive will end up in the environmental omnibus, and then that would be really like opening the Pandora's box. That's with the Commission now. We have made our position clear. We see huge risks if that would happen. And I hope, I think it's a bit hard to.
Okay. We'll take another question from the audience. I saw some other hands at the front here. Lots of hands, excellent. All right, we'll take the question at the front here, and then we'll move.
My name is Rafael, working for NABU, German NGO. I mean, when looking at the water resilience strategy, I thought, I mean, it's not this bad, but it's not binding. I have rather the doubt, and it goes slightly in the same direction, that as long as it is non-binding, we come up with, or the Commission and the Member States and the Council that agree there to come up with good proposals, but then they don't manage to address, for instance, the CIP, which is the driver or the source, and similarly, the MFF doesn't contain money as incentives to provide more water resilience. So what would you say, how do we overcome this schizophrenia of, of course, we as NGOs have to applaud to the water resilience strategy, but then we see that when it matters, we don't get anything.
Who would like this question?
I mean, the next test case where we can actually have influence again, and where I think, or let's put it that way, I count on the Commission to come forward with a good proposal, will be the Climate Resilience Framework. So, formerly known as Climate Adaptation Plan, now it's called Climate Resilience Framework. Let's see what actually will turn out to be. It's going to be legislative. So my hope is that the Commission will take a more holistic view on that, because climate resilience also means water resilience, also means focusing on cost-efficient solutions, which usually are the nature-based solutions. We will not get along only with nature-based solutions, no question about that. But we should recognize that the co-benefits which we can reap when deploying these are worth a lot, and using nature-based solutions, building climate-resilient cities and landscapes saves people's lives. And that is something where I believe we can expect something positive from the Commission, because I know they have already put in a lot of work for the last years in preparing this. And there we also have the connection between water, climate adaptation, climate change mitigation, maybe even agriculture. Let's see.
Okay, thank you very much. I saw a few other hands yesterday at the side. And then maybe
Thank you very much, Carlos Martin Novella. Before retirement, I was the Deputy Secretary of Council for the Transport Commissions. And before that, I was the Deputy Secretary of the IPCC. So first of all, congratulations for the publication. Very well done. Suggestion from my side is that it would benefit to have a list of references. So where is the data coming from? And therefore, how is it possible in the future to review this and to look on the good information exposed there? And then one remark is regarding PFAS. The debate in the European seems to be like open dinner, like PFAS. What is this? Well, this is self-regulated under the Stockholm Convention. There is already a ban established with serious deadlines, not covering all PFAS, but many of them. And in the political debate in Brussels seems to ignore what is already banned at global level.
okay, thank you. First question on data. Is this something that's coming on, or?
I mean, I read that one, so I think the references are in there in the last pages.
I'm sorry, you were asking the references of the atlas, is that right? Okay, sorry.
Data.
Okay, that might be better directed towards Christian. I don't know if you want to answer now, or maybe in drinks afterwards. Sorry, I missed this.
Yes. The references are in the back, although they do mostly refer to the graphics. We do have all the authors' references, but it would have taken too much space to put them all in. So, but if there are any questions regarding that, just feel free to contact us, and we'll be happy to provide any sources and numbers and figures.
Hopefully that helps. We had a couple of questions. Time is ticking, so I would like to squeeze them in. We have one question over to the right, my right. There, yes.
Thank you, Konrad Kramer from the Austrian newspaper Kurier. As a journalist, new correspondent, I have the unpleasant job to try to trace all the EU policies back to real life so my readers can understand it. And to be honest, with all these water, I'm not gonna count down all the water directive strategies I've been looking at from the, no details. I didn't manage to see this policy preventing any of the water catastrophes we see in Europe. Even, I mean, in my neighbor country, Hungary, in my own country, in Spain, everywhere. So just help me break that down. Where does EU policy really help to preserve good water, good and healthy water status? I'll be happy for any practical example. Thank you.
Example.
I mean, it's always hard to say.
I'll give you an example. Netherlands, high level country, very rich. The status of groundwater, everyone knows that it's a catastrophe. What is EU policy doing? Yeah.
That's a different question, I think, nitrates, but.
I mean, it's always difficult proving the counterfactual, right? So of course, because of the Water Framework Directive, several member states, including my own Germany, have passed legislation to improve the status of water. Of course, we're not there yet, but you cannot deny that we have seen improvements in the last 25 years, can you?
Where they were economically feasible and based on national law.
Yes, but the Water Framework Directive is a directive, so it's transposed into national legislation. So as soon as your member states passes legislation on water, it has to take account of the Water Framework Directive.
And I think that, sorry, just to come in that, as clock is ticking, there will be time to discuss and talk about this deeper and further in the drinks afterwards as well. So I think I will perhaps bring this Q&A part to a close, and we can maybe discuss a little bit more if you want to go into some of the details about nitrates policy, how that relates on the ground. But perhaps just before we bring it to a close, I wanted to just have a quick last round of concluding remarks. And for this, I thought it might be a nice note to end on something a bit more hopeful, to send people off with, because the Atlas is, of course, also full of different solutions, policy recommendations. And so perhaps to close this event and send off on a more hopeful note, I thought I would ask each of you to maybe talk more broadly about something that gives you hope about turning the tide towards a better water future, something you've seen, a case study, or something that you feel can bring some hope here. Perhaps I start with Tom, as we've heard more from the other two.
Good question to end with.
Thank you.
I think earlier this year in April in Flanders, well actually in France, Flanders and the Netherlands, we walked along the Scheldt with the initiative Drinkable Scheldt. It's an initiative from Drinkable River Foundation. We, together with a lot of organizations, we organized that. There was no funding, there was nothing, there was just a lot of people that wanted to go for that. And why drinkable rivers? We're never going to drink from the Scheldt again, probably. But it's having this shared dream, it's this vision between politics. You can have policies and so on, but if we can already go for that shared dream. And it mobilized so many people for 30 days from the source of the Scheldt to Vlissingen, near the North Sea. Every day we had 20, 30, 50, sometimes 100 people, and all local initiatives, local groups that were joining and setting up their own events, and being part of that gave me a lot of hope.
Well, if I should continue, I think what is hopeful is that we know what we have today, we know that we have to act. I think there is also a growing understanding on the cost of inaction. The costs are just increasing both for pollution and water-related disasters. And we also know that working with nature really pays off. So it is really a question about finances and economics, and I hope that member states just do the calculations and do wise economic decisions, because that's we have all the numbers, but that pays off.
I had a poster made which says, nature finds a way if we let her. And I've seen so many examples during my travels around Europe to different restoration projects, where in, I think, 95% of the cases, nature restoration took place quicker than the engineers and the scientists thought. So, for example, there was this restoration project in Ireland where they re-wetted a bath, a great bath, and everyone was saying, well, okay, you will close the ditches and nothing will happen for 2 years. And after 2 years, the sparkling was back. After 3 years, the typical butterfly was back. After 5 years, the typical birds are back. So if we provide the space and time, nature will be there and help us. And we shouldn't lose hope, because this planet has already experienced much worse things than us.
Excellent. Thank you very much. It's a great note to end on there. A little more hopeful for the nature side. So thank you very much for all of our speakers. Perhaps a round of applause for our can continue because we are having drinks and also snacks afterwards, so please do stay to discuss further. But thank you to all of our speakers, thank you to everyone that made this event possible, and I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Thank you very much.